Okay, hi everyone, this is SmithyQ, SmithyQ.com, and we're here with another video analysis. And this one is a follow-up to my previous one, in which I analyzed a game for a friend who's rated around 1300 in the Sicilian. This is a game that I played back in 2007, 2006, 2007 apparently. I was 1800, my opponent was 1600, and it reached a very similar position. Not identical, but the black structure certainly was similar. And it's going to show, this is one of my favorite games that I've played. At the time, I was really studying Petrosian, um, trying to develop that side of my game, the defensive prophylaxis side, and we can see this in this game. And perhaps the main theme of this is what is known as the space left behind. And what do I mean by that? And basically, every time you move forward, right? Let's say white would play e4 as the board. Right? He's moving forward. If this pawn moves forward again, and let's just imagine the main line of the Alkine, or one of the main lines, the four pawns attack, is white has moved his pawns forward, which is great. He's getting a lot of space. He's dominating the center. But there's also a lot of space behind these pawns. And we can imagine that basically all of these squares, they can't be protected by pawns. Okay, this square can sort of be protected by pawns. But like, there's this weaknesses here. And if black can get his pieces around the pawns, or if the pawns start getting exchanged, then it's this space back here that can cause white a lot of problems. And that's really the main idea of the hypermodern openings. You're trying to lure white forward so you can counterattack. Either counterattacking the center directly, or trying to counteract that space that's behind the pawns. And again, this is kind of abstract, but we're going to see exactly what I'm talking about in this game. I almost take this idea to the extreme, but it works. And why not? So the opening was the Sicilian. I play c5, knight c3. I play g6. Then he plays knight f3. Okay, d6, d4. So he kind of tricked me into the Sicilian dragon here, if we back up, right? Because often with knight c3, it's the closed structure. And so it's very common to play g6, bishop g7, knight f6 in the closed structure. Usually what will do something similar, often advancing the pawn. And this is sort of roughly how you play. My opponent then played, however, knight f3, and immediately became an open Sicilian. Which is great, which is fine. I only vaguely knew about the dragon, and in fact, if you look at my next two moves, knight f6, bishop e3, knight c6, we'll see that I'm delaying bishop g7. And this is for a very, I don't even know if it's sound, but it was for a reason. We know it didn't happen in the game, but many white players, they like playing with this whole queen d2 and then trying to exchange bishops, right? But if the bishop's back here, it hasn't moved yet, then I'm saving a tempi, right? Imagine if I go bishop g7, then he plays bishop h6, then I take. Whoops. Then I take, right? The bishop's moved twice. If I can leave the bishop here before he gets to this maneuver, then I'm essentially gaining a tempi. And we know how powerful tempi is in the dragon. In fact, actually, I guess f3 would be the correct move order. And even here, I would delay bishop g7. I would usually play, I would think about playing bishop d7 first, you know, queen d2. And then even here, there are times when I'd play h5. Like, what the frig is going on? With the idea, again, these are interesting ideas back then, is I'd play h4, bring the rook over here, and then slide the rook over here to attack the king once he castles. The queen would come over here, or to c7, this goes here, the pawns start marching, and it's certainly an interesting position. At a certain point, if necessary, I could bring the bishop here, but it's not my first thought. Now, again, is this sound? I don't know. Is this mainline theory? Probably not. But I saw it in a game once, I thought it was great, and so I thought I'd play it. My opponent, though, he doesn't do that. He plays bishop e2, so now we're into the classical variation. It's very likely white won't castle queenside here. So I just develop the bishop normally, we both castle, we've got a position. Now it's here in which White takes the knight. And if you look at this position, if you look at the black position, the black structure, the black setup, it is identical to the game that I analyzed the other day. Okay, white's position is a little bit different, but the black structure is the same. And really, the black idea in here is the same. And so what is the black idea? The main thing is that this pawn on c6 controls d5, which is normally a very weak square in the dragon. We'll just back up. Right? If this knight were to move or get exchanged or something, then knight d5 would all of a sudden instantly be the best piece on the board. And if white can get this strike in, sometimes white sacrifices a pawn. Usually white will defend the pawn somehow with f3 or whatever. Right? Getting knight d5 in is very, very good. So by exchanging, all of a sudden knight d5 isn't a threat. This also gives me a chance at a later moment to play d5, and it's quite easy to achieve this. Right? I can play either bishop b7 or bishop e6. I usually prefer bishop e6, queen c7. Rook, I can even move the queen over to here, and d5 is going to come. White simply controls it too much, and let's sort of ignore that move. So the main idea is to play d5. But then, again, I was saying I'm studying Petrosian. My main idea was trying to counteract white's plan. I'm trying to stop white from doing anything active in this game. And so we'll see. First off, okay, so it is white to move, and he plays rook b1, which is instantly, maybe not instantly, but it really shows how not good white's position is. It's certainly nothing to write home about, right? Because the rook is staring at a pawn. It's really, like, doing absolutely nothing. The rook would much rather be on the d file if possible. We can imagine in a perfect world, white would move this knight somewhere and then play c3. But there's no good squares for the knight to move, because again, this pawn controls everything. So anyway, rook b1, not too critical. It does mean that my own rook b8, there's no rush to play that, because the pawn's already defended. What am I in a rush to do? The main thing I want to control in this position is e5. If you looked at the video where I was, my last video where I was talking to my friend, I'm constantly mentioning about this e5 square, especially at the end. And so my only thought, really, is control this square. So if I control that, if white can never play e5, he never has an active possibility in this game. So I play queen c7, so the queen is indirectly controlling e5. That's great. White plays h3, sure, why not? And again, I'm thinking, so we notice how my opponent, again, 1600, he's maybe not wasting time, but he's certainly not trying to punish me in any way, right? He's not coming at me, he's just sort of sitting there. So I'm thinking, how do I control e5? And so I ended up playing knight d7. And so now look at this. I'm now controlling e5, you know, an incredible amount of time. It's going to be extremely difficult for white to ever get this in. Notice how it also opens my bishop all the way out here, which is great. I can combine that with rook b8. And then, lastly, the possibility is for me to play e5 myself. I can play e5, and again, we know the plan. I can play d5, or maybe even f5. There's a whole bunch of possibilities here. But darn it. Chess base! But again, the idea right now isn't so much to be active. I can do lots of active plans in the future. It's almost impossible for white to fully prevent the d5 idea. But it looks like I can prevent the e5 idea. Or at the very least, I'm delaying it for an incredibly long period of time. My opponent goes for it anyway. So he starts with f4. Again, perfect sense. Really, really natural. I play rook b8. He plays bishop d4. So let's just look at this here. I'm going to play one more move. I play rook e8. I could have played e5 directly. And then after exchange, actually split the board. Right? My knight's amazing. He's got a weak pawn. The bishop is here. The bishop can slide over here. Again, d5 or maybe not c5. Bishop e6. Right. Rook b8. There's so many ideas here for white, and we can see, for black, and we can see how my control over e5 is just total. Absolutely total. What can white do? The open f-file doesn't do a heck of a lot. The best he can hope for, probably, is something like, bishop e3, and then try and get pressure the d6 pawn. But even that isn't the world's best plan, right? Darn it! Chess base! Frig! I gotta get a new program. This is ridiculous. Anyway, so e5 was perfectly possible and perfectly good. But then I played rook e8. And this whole idea here, right, is that I'm tempting white to move forward. I want to see if I can, pull white forward so I can use the space left behind. And this is what happens. My opponent, he is so happy to exchange the bishop. And then he plays f5. What does f5 do? f5, okay, sure, is trying to open up the f-file. That's great. But look at this square. My knight jumps in. Take, take. Now let's back up. Let's back up to right here. After 12 moves, and the 16th move. Whoops, sorry, that's the fantasy variation. So we got here, here. Let's just look at what's changed. What's changed in the white position? Well, white has lost his f-pawn and his bishop. That's it. What's changed in the black position? Okay, well, the knight's on a better square. We got the h-file, and our rook will be the first one to slide over, and that's actually facing his king. That's not too bad. With the f-file open, all of a sudden, queen b6, and that's an open diagonal. Okay, I've lost my dark square bishop. He doesn't have dark square bishop either. And in fact, if you look at this position, whose dark squares are weaker? It's really his. Because look at all the pawns that he has on light squares. All these squares are weak. All of them. And I'm able to jump in here, especially after my opponent's next move. He's already in trouble here. He's in trouble. And then he plays b3. And so we could even, we back up, from here, when I first start my knight d7, all of a sudden to here, we can see that white, his position is barely changed at all, right? Except the f-pawn, these things are gone, so it's weaker. Now he has this weakness. This knight isn't even defended right now. Holy cow. And what has black done? Right? Black is 100% ready. Look at this knight. Just watch. Queen b6 check. Uh-oh. King moves over. Now it's on that h-file. And the queen, it's sliding in. Remember at the beginning how I'm talking about the space left behind. By advancing the f-pawn, that made this square much weaker. It's making this square, and when he advances to f5, right? All these squares are weak. He can never chase back my knight now. My knight is permanent. Why? Because he pushed the f5 pawn too far too quickly, and I'm using the space left behind. He played b3. That weakens this square, and so I'm attacking it, right? My queen is inside his territory, and his position is so, I don't even know if uncoordinated is the right word. It's so dire, he actually can't defend against these threats, right? It's actually very difficult. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to move the knight over here? That's pretty crappy. You can't play queen d2. You can't play queen d3. None of those squares are protected. Maybe queen e1, but it's just so ugly. He ends up playing bishop d3, just simply blocking my my queen's attack on the knight. But then I slide over with rook h8. And so it's kind of hilarious, is white played f4, f5, and then he took here on g6 because he wanted to attack my king, presumably, right? Open the f-file. But what happened is that simply gave me the h-file, which is now staring at his king. Uh-oh. He plays queen e2, trying to exchange. No, thank you. I move my queen back. And look, in just a matter of moves, look, the knight is potentially coming in, the bishop is coming in, the queen is looking, the rook. This rook can slide up and over, or it can just slide over once this bishop moves. Everything can jump into the attack. And why is this so powerful? It is like, if we go back, to here, it doesn't look too bad in this position for white. right? But he has advanced his position so prematurely. There's all this space left behind in there, all of these weaknesses, that I'm able to jump in very, very quickly. Their concrete threat is to take on h3 here. If I could take, okay, so if he does nothing, right? Take is just game over. He plays king h2 trying to defend. But this allows a relatively simple tactical sequence to finish it off. Bishop takes h3, g takes h3, and then rook takes h3. And he resigned here because there's no defense after take and take. Sorry, just the rook sliding over, and that's mate. Okay. Now it's mate. And so, I entered this game, right, or, whoops, ignore that. Certainly around here, when we got into this structure, is where I'm just thinking I'm going to restrain my opponent. That's it, and then we'll see what happened. Okay, and so again, I'm just completely thinking about controlling e5. And then I'm letting him come at me. I'm not saying these are the best moves here. They're not really bad moves. The computer kind of fluctuates, whether it likes it or it doesn't like it. White never really has an advantage from this point forward, so I'm certainly playing well enough. But I'm giving White essentially the rope to hang himself, right? I'm saying, please come at me, advance with your pawns. And that's exactly what he does. Takes, and he plays this f5. And then he takes here, right? And the first thought is probably, oh, he's pretty happy. He's got the f-file. Maybe he can do something like this, or, you know, something like this, what have you. But it's pure fantasy. Because Black's position is incredibly solid. Everything is protected. My knight is the best knight on the board. And I'm able to get into his weaknesses. And he has nothing to compensate. And it's amazing, right? If you don't know this idea about, you know, the space and the weaknesses in there, how fast the attack comes in, especially after b3, which is a nothing move. Which, again, it makes sense, right? It's not just a like, he wants to play b pawn so we can move the rook over, right? So that way the pawn isn't hanging. But there are just so many weaknesses now that just, it's a fatal attack. There's nothing you can do about it. And we can see how, just how fast it can come. And so this is why it's every pawn move, you have to be so careful. And this also is another example of how the Sicilian is such a tough opening for both sides. Right? If you play this strategy wrong, and believe me, I played it wrong before, where I try and coax my opponent forward, only he goes forward really well, and then you get wiped off the board. Or your opponent really prepares it, and then you're stuck there as Black with no counterplay. That really sucks, right? That's when Hypermodern goes wrong. Then it's terrible, and you just lose. But the same thing is possible for White. It's incredibly complex, difficult positions, and I never had success with Sicilian until I got to 16, 17, 1800 rated, which is why I don't really recommend the Sicilian for beginners. If you really enjoy the position, that's fine. But if you don't, I mean, playing like this, it's tough for both sides. It's often easier to cut your teeth on easier openings. But again, this is one of my favorite games, so I want to share that. And we can see how it's in a very similar structure. And even though I never actually played d5 or e5 in this, even though that's kind of the main plan, is I still ended up having complete control of the center. My pieces control the center. Anyway, so that's that. I'll put an analysis on my blog if you're interested in that. But that'll do it. So you can check that out at SmithyQ.com. If you want to like and subscribe, that's fantastic. Comments, criticism, feedback, always appreciated. Yeah, but let me know if you like this, or if you want to see anything for me to do in the future. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.